time when the work that Jesus did on earth was very unusual to his men, his disciples, but it was more so in a different way to Paul. Paul was not only irate, he was incensed. And because of his anger, we received a tremendous learning, because he did too. It was his Damascus experience that made him see something that the world has not seen, that even students of mystical literature sometimes have not been aware of. He was angry because there was Jesus saying to a lot of his type of people who were Hebrews like himself, many things that inflamed them. And this man Jesus was such a bone of contention that he set out to kill as many Hebrews who had been converted, and there were others who were equally converted, to the doctrine of Jesus Christ. Paul didn't know him as Jesus Christ. Paul just knew him as a rebel, possibly a heathen, because Paul's religion was very intense and very specific. And it was when in Damascus that he had his out-of-the-body experience. So intense that he became blinded to human eyes, that he discovered what you and I possibly had not discovered, that he was angry at a man who wasn't there. The body of Jesus was not there. He was angry at a phantom. And his later teaching, when it spoke of that experience, concluded, henceforth know we no man after the flesh. Even his followers did not realize what had happened. They did not know that he discovered that Jesus had no physical body. And the reason he discovered it is because he then discovered, first, that he had no physical body. And when he was aware that he had no physical body, but he was alive, he knew that was the secret of Jesus Christ. Henceforth know no man after the flesh. It should have become an international religion, or at least an international knowing. But if the truth were told today, there wouldn't be a church in the world that would be willing to say that's the truth, in spite of Paul, in spite of Jesus, and in spite of the work that Jesus did to establish that he, without a physical body, have been able to influence, about 500 people, and then more, in the truth of his doctrine, and that he had done it even though the people thought they saw him when he came down from the mountain, when he lectured, when he appeared in the synagogues. If they were here now, if we were to tell them that he was never there, they were looking at the Spirit of God, and they were seeing a man. But the world mind had veiled the spiritual self, and then the individual mind, acting on the knowledge of the world mind, had completed it, and now there was a physical man. And just as these men who were worshiping him believed that he was a physical man, they believed that they were physical men and women. And we had to learn in the 20th century, on the verge of the 21st, that Jesus never appeared in the physical world. We had to learn that his so-called crucifixion was possible, and his emergence from it was not because God had resurrected him, but because his spiritual body, his immortal, eternal body, was not seen by the very men who sought his crucifixion and thought they had attained it. But what of that? That was just one man. Paul was another. What was his message? Paul gave it to us. Henceforth, knowing no man after the flesh. Now we're going to look around at each other and say, come on, you're over there, John. You're over there, Phyllis. But we're wrong. And at this moment, as we seek that life which is eternal, we must remember that no human flesh achieves life eternal. You have to walk back to your families and accept that they believe you are a physical being. But in your spiritual consciousness, in the reality of you, if you wish to attain eternal life, you must know. And then you must prove that you know that you are not in a body of flesh. Fortunately, there are a few who are willing to throw off the concept of flesh and if you know them and they know you, it will be easier for you to live in their presence without pretense. But in the main, your position in the world will have to be governed by the world belief that you are one thing and your knowledge that you are something else. And in addition, your knowledge that the world is something else. If you had a religion, that would have to be it. I believe, I know the incorporeality of man. The incorporeal man obviously has different needs than the corporeal man. And when we have a relationship with an incorporeal man, that's one thing. But when you have a relationship with a corporeal man, these are parts of the teaching that you cannot explain to a beginner. It may take years before you can get around to saying, I know you think I'm a human being with a physical body, but I'm not. And yet, that must be your sacred truth. There is no corporeal man in the kingdom of God. And there is no corporeal individual in this world, although 6 billion appear in it. Now, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to carry on your life when you know you are incorporeal being and the world thinks of you as a corporeal being? That's the task we all have. We have to walk through the corporeal world knowing none of it is there. You may find that you have been trying to do this by now and somewhat succeeding, but you've had to remain silent about the truth of yourself. There was nothing you could say to anyone. Only one who was prepared to hear you and understand you. And usually it's only one who is prepared to live the same way. During catastrophes, you will find it very helpful to realize the incorporeal nature of your being. During earthquakes, for example, if there had been an earthquake in the vicinity where Jesus or his disciples were, they would not have been hit. Their knowledge of their own incorporeality, which was truth, would have shielded them from the falseness of matter falling down. The world would have seen the matter. They would have seen the living spirit. Of course, that wouldn't happen exactly at a certain stage of their training, when there was still persuaded that matter was their life. But as he kept teaching them with the healings, even though they couldn't quite figure out what he was doing or how, there was a sense that not only was he a magic man, but he had a certain knowledge. And that knowledge was translating itself into a being that is recovered from a problem which appeared to be physical. If you review his life, you see that many of the tests that he was put to involved his knowledge that the physical world did not yield to the man of spirit what the man of spirit required. And his teaching was so subtle that no matter what he did, he managed to put into it a little more of the truth, so that he was constantly on a podium, you might say, always teaching truth. Every minute of his waking hours, truth was his teaching. And though it was concealed from the multitudes, and even sometimes concealed from the disciples, he was teaching that man has no physical form. And when he taught it, he disappeared and then reappeared elsewhere, because no physical form was everywhere. The everywhereness of man's incorporeal body is the truth of us now. When we realize it, we will be able to appear in more places than one place that our body is now. When we lose the concept of a physical body, and you'll be forced into it. You'll say, how am I going to do it? Well, you won't have choice. You might be in an earthquake. Something will register with you very quickly. You might be drowning. Something will register with you very quickly. I'm not in this body. That may be the first time that you felt and realized that I am not in this body. And then when the event is finished and you recollect, you may wonder, what did happen to me? I thought I realized I wasn't in this body. But of course, and then you wonder, was I? Am I? And you realize the only thing that saved you was the fact that you are not in the body. But you won't know, perhaps, that that's what saved you. Suppose we were in an airplane. My friends have been in airplanes. I have been in airplanes. You came here in an airplane. Did you realize while you were in the plane that you are incorporeal? Maybe some did, a few, but in the main, we all thought of ourselves as weighing so much, having so many pounds of baggage, having to get there at such a time. Maybe I underestimate us. Maybe some of us felt that spirit is going to a spiritual meeting. But you must remember that at all times it never changes, whether you're walking on the street, flying in an airplane, or in the midst of an earthquake. You are always spiritual being. And that knowledge will keep you whole, intact, free of the problems that will come to the people who are not aware of their nature as the true Spirit of God. You can imagine a God on an airplane being frightened by the descent of the plane. But I, spiritually, am learning that I am the Christ, and that I am one with God at all times. And that oneness is a consistent, eternal thing. No matter how long I appear in form, no matter how long I dwell in a higher level of consciousness, nothing will change the fact that I and the Father are one being. Thou seest me, thou seest the Father. The Father's not in an earthquake, or a thunderstorm, or a deluge, or a flood. Neither am I. Don't ask me how I'll get out of it. I'm not in it. Because I can have no experience that is not a God experience, except an untrue experience. And if I remember the truth, then that's the end of the untrue experience. You say, well, just my knowing a fact isn't going to preserve me. That depends on how you know it. If your brain ticks away and it says to you, don't you know your spirit? You're just making a little entry into the truth. But when you know your spirit, it's because your soul reaches that realization, and the Christ mind which you have learned to submit to establishes the fact that your identity is one with God at that moment. Henceforth know we no man after the flesh. I know we've learned it, we've said it, we've repeated it to ourselves, but we're having this meeting today to never forget it. God is not the creator of a stillborn baby. Babies are made of flesh. God is not the creator of stillborn babies made of flesh. What about other babies? They're also made of flesh. God is not the creator of babies. Look at a baby today, then look at it 70 or 80 years from now. Today it bursts with life. Later, it bursts with death. You wouldn't say God created that baby or that corpse. But at the beginning, when we see the baby, we think God must have created it. Look, it's so perfect. Don't be fooled. God is not the father of any baby in this world. And God is not the cause of death. Because death is an illusion. No person, no individual, the spirit of an individual remains alive forever. All death on the earth since the world began is nothing more than a fourth world illusion. And just as the corporeal person is not in the flesh is not in the world, and the corporeal person is not in the world, but he appears to be, just as Jesus appeared to be in the world. We were taking orders from a man who was not in this world. How do we know that? I am not in this world, said he. And that's how we know it. I am not in this world. I am not of this world. And you can have no power over me, Pilate, because I am not a man of flesh. And if I could speak to you as I would like to, if you could understand, I would tell you the same, that you are not in this world, because you are not a man of flesh. All of the true teaching has been hidden from the people of this world. But now that we have it, now that some of us have enjoyed the truth before tonight, before today, what are we doing with it? I don't think our job is to run out and express it, say it to friends. I think our job is to demonstrate it. Not to demonstrate who we are, but to demonstrate the advantages of being who we are. And when we can do that, then the time will come when someone will say to you, how did you escape that? And you work your own answers. You say to the Spirit within, what'll I tell this person? And the Spirit will say to you, don't tell them anything. I will tell them. I will tell your story wherever I feel it should be told. That's what we're about to do. There are many among us who are needlessly suffering from the belief that they are in the body. It would horrify them. It would simply astound them to know that they're not. But knowing they're not is inevitable. I'm reminded of an incident at LaGuardia Airport. When a wife saved her husband. Pulled him up recently. And the mother, one of our students, called us. And in a few days, the young man was up and about, working at his business, after having swallowed the ocean, and after having swallowed as much carbon monoxide as he could. Somehow, he was fine. He did not realize, perhaps, that he was the Spirit of God. And maybe he doesn't realize it now. But someday, he will realize it. Another one of our students, it's a story that you all know. And it was a happy story now. And the people who saved this young man, who saw the truth of him, were 3 students who had gathered. They had phoned me to be exact, but I wasn't available or there, and they had just come from one of our seminars, and he'd fallen off a roof. And those 3 held him in the truth of his being. They saw in some way that he was the child of God, he was the Spirit, and that Spirit had to be living. But those are only a few cases that are known to us. There are so many cases in which we have either participated as individuals or have known about, and in some cases, the individuals not realizing their identity, thinking of themselves as material, and not having any relatives or close ones who knew of their identity, had passed away from the human picture into an oblivion in this world. But as truth becomes more known to all of us and to all of the people we work with and for, word will spread without our saying it that there is a force an infinite force, and that it has its outlet in each of us as we open our consciousness to know the truth. And ultimately, these individuals and the ones who benefit from it and then learn the lesson will equip this world with sure knowledge will be working in the will of God. And precisely what is in store for those who work in the will of God, we only know in general terms. But because of our ability and dedication to expressing the truth at all times, and our capacity to remember who we are, wherever we are, the world will slowly become enlightened. Joel said in one of his books that an atomic bomb was no problem to the Spirit of God. He said one who had the Spirit of God was safe because he would know that an atomic bomb has nobody to operate it. You might ponder that for a long time, and you might not like to see that test made, but Joel made that statement, I think it was in Attaining Mystical Consciousness. Well, a bomb, which would be the ruination of an area that would make the thing that dropped over Tokyo look like nothing. Such a bomb today would be impossible in the presence of one, he said, one who is in Christ consciousness. That is, if you were conscious of your Christ consciousness and you were present at a bomb site, at the release of such a bomb, you would find that the power of it would not explode. He felt that the consciousness would prevent anyone from operating it. I suppose he'd be willing to put it to the test. Nonetheless, if he said so, he would have reason to say so. And we can assume from his statement that whatever the power of God dictates, that is a law on this earth. And if one has sufficient transparency to permit the operation of God law by his fidelity to incorporeality, his fidelity to the truth that you won't find any impurity in my being, I am not physical. I am not flesh. That one who knew this, as the Christ must know it, will be able to stand in the way of an atom bomb. I don't know who's going to be called upon to prove this, or if anyone will be. I just know that the voice of the Father has made the statement. And it's in print, and it's in the book, Attaining the Mystical Consciousness. It may be on page 14, I'm not sure. Now then, when we hear about the great power that is within a person who accepts his own non-physicality, you must know that the acceptance of non-physicality, although it appears to be impossible, is also the acceptance of the spiritual body which has all power. The spiritual body which cannot be crucified. Now it seems that we're in a miracle area where we're being asked to consider the miraculous. But in Christ, these so-called miracles are normal. All manner of healing came through the Christ, who is not in the form. Can you imagine the Christ not in the form, bringing vision? To eyes that could not see? That to us borders on the miraculous. And then saying to you and I, even greater works will you do? We can't even understand that. Did he mean more works? Or greater in scope? Or did he mean that you, when you attain your full measure of Christ, you will do greater works? Well, he must have intended our growth of perception if he thought we would do greater works. Who was he speaking of? He wasn't talking to a vacuum. He was talking to the invisible Christ of all of us. He was talking to the invisible Christ of his own disciples. And they have gone on and circulated around the world, spreading the gospel. But always the gospel had a finger to its lips for fear that people not being ready would take light of the teaching, possibly ridicule it, possibly dare some poor unfortunate man to prove something that he couldn't. And so slowly, 2,000 years, this teaching has matured on the burner, just heating slowly, It hasn't been served to the public. Each of us, therefore, coming into the Christ teaching, learning that I am not in the body, I am that self which is everywhere, though I do not realize it yet. I am that self which can perform greater things than the Christ has demonstrated to date, although I don't realize it yet. I nonetheless am that identity. Everybody seems relatively happy. I would say that they're not at all disturbed about being incorporeal. I'm real serious about it. Everybody seems happy about it. That's a pretty good sign. Maybe we should stay very close to that subject for the next few days. But Jesus said something which is related to that. He said, pick up your cross and follow me. And you know what was waiting at the end of his rainbow? He was going to teach them that they are eternal beings. Pick up your cross and follow me into the realization that you are an eternal being. As a matter of fact, there's only one. We each are the eternal being. We each are the life of God. And it would follow from that that we can't be in physical bodies that pass on, because the life of God doesn't pass on. So when we learn that we are the life of God, thou seest me, thou seest the Father, all the time we've been told that if you see the Father when you see me, you're seeing that life which is eternal and which has no possibility of ever passing from reality. There should be the assurance now, in words and to some degree of understanding, and some to a degree of realization, that I am the Spirit of God, that I am not in form, that I am incorporeal, that my spirit knows no defect, because there are no defects in the Spirit of God, that my spirit is ageless, that I've always existed as the Spirit of God long before I was born. And then the first birth becomes known as the illusion or the first death. But the world of God has always existed. The world of man has some beginning in the far-off distance but I existed before the world began. I will always exist. So it's no question about how long my life is going to be. It's going to be as long as the life of God. Can't we just relax in the knowledge that the life of God is my life, and the laws of God uphold that life, and that as long as I live in the consciousness which is aware of God life in me and my fellow man, though he does not yet realize it, I do. And so everywhere I look at the invisible presence of the life of God. That's a lot different than what we generally look at in this world. And when we find we're incapable of remembering that and of knowing that, everywhere is the life of God, and I'm looking at it all the time, then we are divorced from the truth, and we're into the good and bad world, which is not my Father's kingdom. Now, I'm for making everything happen, not just theories. And so when you hear this, I'd like you to feel that you can go to yourself, your true being, your being which is not in the physical form, and you can have a talk with it. And you can say to that being, why don't you express yourself in more of my life than you've been doing in the past? Why don't you make yourself known? You might find an unspoken reply which says, well, if you will hold me in consciousness and remember that I am with you, that I am your very essence, and you will not act unseemly, you will not act out of character with the truth of your being, that you will address everyone with the knowledge that you are speaking to the life of God, even though that life does not come out and say so to you. Maybe you will determine that you have a different way of living among people. This is a very important phase of our work, how we associate with people. When we know that they are as incorporeal as we are, and because of it, we bring them into a higher plane in which we are reacting to them not as other people do, but as the Spirit of God reacts to the Spirit of God. Do people say when you have left the scene, she's a wonderful person, without knowing why? Do people ever say of you that there's something about you that they like, they wish they could understand you better? They should be saying it. And you should make it a point that when you approach, you approach no one without the knowledge that here is the living Spirit of God, the life of God. It seems to be getting older to my vision, but it isn't. It seems to be cross, but God isn't cross. It seems to be forgetful, but God isn't forgetful. Can you see the divinity that is there, and only the divinity? As you try, you will realize that your judgment of them as divinity is your judgment of yourself. When the divinity in you takes the trouble to see the divinity in them, you are bringing your divinity into activity. Now then, let's look at the healings again. We'll see them a little differently. In every case, the Christ was seeing the invisible divinity of the victim. And when the Christ brought that victim to a healing, and we saw a person whose bones were well knit, who could function, that was an illusion too. That is what we saw. We saw an improvement, but we were looking at the Spirit of God. And that's all we're ever looking at, whether it's improved or not. Do you see what a difference it can make in the world when there are those who are able to look and see the invisible, and then to accept the invisible before they can see it? That's what we're called upon to do. Now let's take our own lives. What is imperfect? Only our viewpoint. Nothing is imperfect in our lives. Nothing can be. The life of God is perfect. So therefore, whatever seems to be imperfect is a mental concept that we entertain. I've got rheumatism. Who has rheumatism? Your incorporeal self doesn't know what rheumatism is. Who has the heart attack? Your incorporeal self doesn't have a heart attack. Does knowing that you have an incorporeal self make a difference in the degree to which this heart attack or this rheumatism has invaded your body? Does knowing that you have no body to be invaded, do you think that makes a difference? Why not experiment with yourself and find out? Find out if your ailment is not happening. Find out if the ailment you think you have cannot happen in your true body. Why does Jesus tell us? He promises everlasting life to those who love him. Why does he promise this? He's not promising everlasting human life. He knows that life has no death. And he's simply promising that when you live your life, your true life, there will be no death. So you have the word of the man who made the demonstration that as I am the Son of God, you are. So pick up your cross and follow me. And the only way you can follow me is if you get into the knowledge that you have an incorporeal body of spirit, which can go where I go and can do what I do. And that invitation was extended to everyone on the earth to follow me. We say, how can I follow you? Now you know. You follow in the knowledge that my spiritual body is the same as his spiritual body. They are not two. They are one. And as you follow what he does, where he does it, you begin to feel that you may develop the capacity to do as he suggested, to learn, to live, and perform as he performed. Now take the healing again. See it from that point of view. This individual comes to you for the healing. At one time, you just closed your eyes and you charged like a bull and said something or other, or felt something or other. Maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. This individual, number one, is the life of God. No, it's not the life of God asking you to heal him. It's the person who doesn't know he's the life of God, but is. You know it. You've got to know it. Not only is he the life of God or she the life of God, but her body is spirit and perfect as God. You've got to know it. Her spiritual body is as perfect as God's body because they're the same body. Don't put her in a little container. Don't give her boundaries. The infinite body of God is the body of all who walk the earth. So now you know her infinite body. You know her infinite life. You know the non-defects in the infinite body of God, in the infinite life of God. You might say one with God is a majority, just the knowing. But he told us two in his name, so you have the same infinite body. You have the same infinite mind. And put together your facts. I am the Spirit of God, perfect as the Father. She is the Spirit of God, perfect as the Father. Where is the error? The error was some form of concept became visible, painful. It was only a concept because there's no error in the kingdom of God where we live. There is no error in our kingdom. And if I am the life of God with the incorporeal body of God, and she is the same, and we are one, and that one is the majority. That one will come forth to say, I am healed. I don't know that I'm incorporeal. I don't know that I'm the life of God, or I wouldn't have come to you in the first place. Or I may know it, but I haven't got the deep understanding that it's the truth. But I am seeing in this exhibition, this demonstration, that something is kneeling my body. Something is revealing that where there was rheumatism, there's less and less of it. Where there was a heart attack, it isn't there. I've even known cases where the individual with a heart attack heard the inner voice saying, you never had a heart attack. And that's how it was. These are glorious moments. And they quadruple your faith in the truth that exists, because there's nothing like the experience of the truth to make you a forever believer that you have another body than the one you walk the earth in. And the one you walk the earth in is not on the earth. Something has told you that I'm walking in that body. The world mind has told you that. You're not walking in a body. You are an infinite being. You've got to dwell with that a long time before you can understand the truth of it. I am spirit. But spirit is everywhere. You can't cut a knife, take a knife and cut spirit in half. How can you have a spiritual body that is not infinite? So the wonder is, how can we all have an infinite spiritual body? We must all have the same body. But in the world of human events, with world mind creating an individual mind splitting up and separate, governing a specific body, and then the whole illusion played back. I have this body, and she has that body, and he has another one. We're all divided. And yet we're not divided. So in our deeper secret, the truth of our being, we are the infinite one in an infinite body, enjoying all there is in infinity, as long as we are constantly aware of the truth of divine being. There's not one little God here and one little God there and one little God here. There's one divine being. And you can say, I am that divine being. She can say it. And the third one can say it. Because you all are that one divine being. You're not what you appear to be. And someday, when the Word is made flesh, it will be spiritual flesh that you realize is yours. When Jesus instructed the new disciples in the Sermon on the Mount, he told them all to go to their closet. I don't know how long meditation has been on the earth, but it was spoken of then. He wanted them to go into the quietness of their own soul, locked in, resting there, learning what the soul teaches. And as we do that, we find that our soul has many, many truths to reveal to us about our own being. When you have a soul meditation, when you lock yourself in your closet, the world now knows a bit about meditation. Maybe there are millions and millions of people who are meditating. Our job is to get to the level where we meditate to know the Father aright. We meditate to hear the inner Christ. We don't often meditate to solve a particular problem, because when you know you have no problems other than the problem of thinking you have a problem, that you are momentarily under the illusion of having a problem. You are able to go into meditation in a different way than if you're trying to solve something. When you try to solve something, you're saying, Father, I've got this and that and the other thing, and I'd like you to make some solution to it. And you may be surprised to discover that the Father doesn't respond to your problems. The Father doesn't hear you, because there are no problems in His kingdom. But rather you go into the quietness of contemplation, or the silence of meditation, to come to a deeper understanding of the truth of being. Suppose we were to rest in that and try to imagine what our life will be like when the world has reached an agreement that truth is truth, that spirit is spirit, there is nothing else. Let's say we set a fictitious time. What will our life be like in 1,000 years? The 1,000 years won't pass, but there will be a space of time in which we are becoming adjusted to a new development. I will call that space of time 1,000 years. What will we consider to be the perfect solution for man in that 1,000 years? Dwell on it a moment. Our concepts of space and time are going to change radically. You'll find that time has no meaning for you, and that space in which we travel now, we will not travel in as we do now. We will find that time has no existence whatsoever. That space is equally non-existent. We are the space. We are the time. We are all that exists in reality. Every ounce and inch of reality is you. And it's important that we grow into this level of understanding by the faith and truth that we maintain, because we won't be lifted into it until we're dependable. I mean spiritually dependable. While we're on this planet, in our present form, There are no great changes we're asked to make. We're not told to be childless, not told to get married, not to get married. We maintain the same relationships. It's the spirit in which we do it, the spirit in which we hold each other. The truth that we permit and the lies that we don't permit. Now then, Jesus showed he was not in a body. By emerging from crucifixion untouched, by teaching his disciples that they were not in a body. That's why they were so willing to go with him. By lifting those who came to him into their true body, which revealed that they were perfect as the Father. By having Lazarus entombed step forth, and lo and behold, he had never been dead. By standing on ships that appeared somewhere else as quickly as possible, to show he was not in form, and that because he was not in form, whatever he touched was not in form, because form touches form. Non-form touches non-form. To open us to the miracle of the incorporeal universe in which we are now immortal eternal life. And as we start with this knowledge, even the Bible will be read with different eyes. We'll see what he was trying to say and what the world did not know he was trying to say. That's why the parables were there. We thought that a parable was something. He'd say one thing and then he'd say another thing. We thought that was it. The parables are the third thing. The parables are that which he said for more involved or evolved students, and then beyond the parable was the truth. In every double parable was a third truth of invisibility, incorporeality, spiritual nature of things, the perfection that is present in all things, the fact that his audience and he were one being. And they never thought of him as one being with themselves. He was saying, watch me closely. You're looking at yourself. Perhaps from these short talks, we're getting a little more of the nature of our own being than we had anticipated. And as we enter the fifth class, I think, I don't even know what it is, but the fifth, sixth, and seventh, and eighth classes will carry us to the irrevocable conclusion that I must live in the Spirit. Anything else would be non-living. And I must accept the entire world of human beings as a disguise for the infinite spiritual selfhood of everyone who appears as a human being. I must know their immortality, and quietly I will see them as spiritual flesh. Flesh without problems, without a day that will someday end. I will see the infinity of each one's being as my own. When you develop your point of view to infinity, accepted for the universe, you're freeing yourself. And I hope we can do that together, because I know there is a lot of personal self still remaining in each of us to a more or less degree. And that personal self must go, and will go. We'll see that personal self is an untruth. There is no personal me. And everything that I have as a personal problem is as untrue as a personal me. Let's end it on that note, in the realization that my universe is spirit. It will always be spirit. And that secretly I know everyone to be an immortal in the one being, learning that God is his life. We'll end with a meditation, please. Let's proceed it with a brief contemplation. The presence of the Father is with me now. I hear it, I know it, I feel it. I rest in the Father. I'm taking myself out of the picture as a person. I rest totally in the perfection of the Father. Whatever imperfection I thought I had, I reject as an impossibility. With that I am still.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into our channel. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit that like button below. It really helps us out. And why not share this video with your friends? Spread the word and help us reach more people. Lastly, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notifications so you never miss a new video from us. Thanks for watching and see you next time.